Glendale Triple Crown. This is the rider analysis. It's going to be high paced. We're going to talk about Deegan, Tomac, Roczen, and many others. I'm going to use my own footage, so let me know what you think in the comments and make sure you subscribe. First off, let's talk about the triple over the starting gate. This thing was massive. It didn't do it justice on TV. And we had Deegan jump it on the 250. You actually wasn't the first one. Juju was the first one to do it, but watch as he jumps this and how aggressive he is. Let's listen to his motor and you can hear him rev it up and just give it everything that Star Yamaha has to get over. And what he is doing is he is moving his ankles back on the foot pegs to the point where he can push his heels into the ground and he can lean way back on the motorcycle to make sure that he gets enough lift. And you'll see him as he preloads. He's bending his knees just a little bit and then he's going to push down off of his heels and get straight to be able to just barely make it over. And if we watch his teammate Cooper Webb on the Star Yamaha 450, he does it like it's almost no big deal. Listen to his bike. Right up and over. And he even has the cojones to pull a tear off as he goes over. But what is interesting is Ken Roczen with his Suzuki. That Suzuki, I don't know if it's just not that fast. I mean, it is a Suzuki, but it's definitely not as fast as those Star Yamahas. And Kenny's one of the lighter guys of the field. But I saw him having to do the preload technique like Deegan. And then later in the main event, he was seat bouncing it to get as much lift as possible to get over. And he was barely making it. Some laps, he couldn't do it consistently. A lot of the guys were having trouble doing it. And if we go to the whoop section, this was incredibly hard pack and blue groove, but the middle of it was just a bunch of marbles. And so we saw all the riders starting to just skim them, da, 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 and their ass ends were going back and forth because they were hitting the little curbs on top. But the reason why they weren't jumping them is because in between them was just nothing but just this marbles. So if they jumped, they would slip out. It was much faster to just stay on top of them, and you had to stay on top of the first 8 inches because if your front wheel or rear wheel dropped down, well, now you're into that real slippery stuff because it's basically like dirt on top of ice when it's that blue groove. And Kenny was able to come around the corner with like almost no brakes whatsoever, just a consistent coast and seat bounce quad into it, and he carried so much momentum. And we also saw Deegan was the first rider to actually do that on the 250s. And speaking of Deegan, Deegan was starting to jump the first wall jump coming back across the start, and he sort of started a trend where a lot of other riders started to jump there as well. And it's interesting that we see him hit his shift lever and just goes down a gear before that triple. Watch how fast these guys go around these corners, and what they're doing is they are not braking and they're not necessarily coasting. Listen to their motors. This is Webb, and what he is doing is he is shifting down and accelerating so that when he lands, he's letting the engine do the braking for him, which is great. That's something that I noticed Jason Anderson doing a lot, and most of these guys are doing now. Deegan does it as well. Listen to his bike. And then if we're starting to look at one of the major quads, again, I'm all about listening to these motorcycles. Listen to Cooper Webb as he launches or hucks this quad. And what he is doing is he is going to tap the rear brake and have multiple adjustments in the air on angle. So when he lands, he's going to land with both wheels. He's not going to be pointed down. He notices that, hey, I'm going to tap the rear brake because I'm going to make it cleanly. And then he goes, no, I'm actually going to over jump it. So he lifts that front wheel up so that he lands with both wheels on the ground at the same time. And he's accelerating and he's making that little G out. So listen to the sand section. These guys were hauling effing ass, and what they were doing was they were a little bit of trail braking. What I heard was they were coming in raw, and then they got on the brakes, and then right before they entered the sand, they were still on the brakes, but they got on the gas. So it was like, and it sucked the motorcycles down into the sand, and you could see them as they accelerate, especially Tomac as he's coming through here almost at 180 degrees to make some passes. And because the track was dry and hard pack. It just got that marbles on top. We saw a lot of guys weight the outside peg. So in this right-hand corner, you'll see them as they brake slide, where they're actually on the brakes around this corner, and they're going to back the ass end around and then dump the clutch and grab the throttle. And it makes this just sweet little just drift on the motorcycle. And what they're doing is they're weighting that outside peg on the left-hand side so that they're putting a lot of pressure down on the motorcycle to keep them up as they're moving their ass around, so that it's swinging, ironically, the back end of the motorcycle around, and they're able to just get on the gas quickly, and there's zero ruts. That's why they were able to do this. And Cole Davies impressed the hell out of me. He was able to win 2 out of the 3 races by not doing some of the big jumps. As far as the quad in the back, I mean, there's basically 3 big ones that he wasn't hitting. However, across the start, watch him as he wheelies over this massive landing that Kenny and a few of the other guys were tripling in downsiding. Just spectacular how he lifts that front wheel up, does a beautiful wheelie into it, and then soaks it up. And also Juju, on right after the second corner on the start, he's able to wheelie and make some beautiful passes where they change this for dirt works from qualifying to race day. They were trying to make a couple different race lines, which I do approve of. I definitely approve abso-effing-lutely about them cutting the inside down so that these guys could wheelie, then triple, and then they added a little bump afterwards so then they could double, so they weren't just singling into the face of the triple. And the long over jumps of the singles, right, the walls, Kenny said at the press conference that it was hurting his ankles and also his wrists. And truthfully, what they should have done is just made these twice as tall, so nobody wanted to jump over it, because you were going to jump into the ceiling, right? Even though that they're at State Farm Stadium, it is a retractable ceiling, so they literally probably could have jumped out of the ceiling, out of the stadium. I'm making myself laugh, but I'm digressing just once during the video. That was the only caveat I had with the whole track. Loved it. Absolutely effing loved it.